Okay, should we start now? Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Susan Bergman, and I'm a member of the Israel Action Committee. And I want to welcome everyone to our program tonight with Mia Schoen, speaking about making Aliyah and finding a life in the arts. Mia is a Newton native who grew up here at Temple Emmanuel and is now a mosaic mural artist and instructor who works out of her studios in Boston and Tel Aviv. Her grandmother, Nancy Schoen, is a respected sculptor, and she created the Make Way for Ducklings sculpture in the Boston Public Garden, in addition to countless publicly displayed sculptures around the world. Mia's mom, Jill, and sister, Jackie, founded the Paint Bar in Newton. Mia graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in fine art and design in 2009. After settling in Boston in 2014, Mia made the decision to visit Tel Aviv for 3 months, but quickly fell in love with the city for its vibrant art scene, heart, and soul, and has split her time between both cities ever since. With a strong affinity for public art, Mia has made it her mission to spread large, colorful mosaics throughout Israel and internationally, incorporating local tiles and recycled materials into her work. In addition to her public art, Mia teaches small mosaic workshops out of her studio twice a month and upon request. If you have any questions during the talk, please write them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Barry will compile those questions and present them to Mia at the end of her talk. Mia, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Sue and Barry, for bringing me. I'm really happy to be with you all. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to be sharing my screen for a large part of this so that you can see some images, because I think it would be a little lame for me to, talk about mosaics without showing you some images. So I'm going to be sharing my screen. I see a lot of familiar faces on here, so I'm really excited to be here. So just give me a second, and I'll get started. Okay. Tell me when you can see it so that I just have a sense. Can you all see? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, so I'll get started. I titled this Art in Aliyah. Barry and Sue were so nice to sort of ask me to discuss how my art has played into Aliyah and what it sort of means to make Aliyah, and what my background was and sort of how did I do this. And so I'm happy to kind of talk about that. So what I decided to do is I'm going to share my work, and I'm going to kind of here and there talk about my journey of making Aliyah, and then also all of the people. What a huge part of my work and making collaborative community-focused mosaics is involving the actual community. So I'm going to be highlighting the different people I've met along the way, because I think that's part of my story and really exciting for me. So I'm going to start. I'll start by talking about my family a bit. You guys can see, as you know, we have a very artistic family. My mom and sister own the Paint Bar. My grandmother, who I see here, is a sculptor. My aunt is also a ceramicist, and I have cousins who paint. And even in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that they're watercolors by my great-grandmother, who was born in 1900. So collectively, from a young age, we've all been making art and very encouraged to make art. So I thought I'd share that to give you some background. And when I was in Boston, sort of this is the work that I was doing before I left from Israel. So mainly portrait focused. I was painting a lot. You can sort of see that I was using lots of very bold colors, which I think makes sense if we look at work down the line. So very aggressive, bold colors. Also interacting always with people and people that I came across. So I think that has been very important before I left for Israel and then after. So in 2014, this is me when I first was in Tel Aviv. So the picture on the left is a landscape that I bought in Jerusalem when I was there for Birthright in 2012. This was the first time that I had ever seen Israeli art, not in a traditional manner. So I was sort of looking at artists and seeing that they explore and that there was art that was less Judaic and more Israeli. And so that was really interesting to me. So when I went to Israel in 2014, I intended to go for 3 months just to sort of focus on art and learn a bit more. And so what ended up happening was that I was hired by the Tel Aviv Art Studio, which is a small studio in Tel Aviv, to make my first mosaic. So 3 months kept turning into 4 months, 5 months, and now it's been about 6 years since I've lived in Israel. So throughout that time, I was able to kind of investigate. I thought I would share just some Israeli artists with you all because it's always interesting to see what's happening in Israel. So again, this is like a unique view of the Tel Aviv landscape that I would have never seen growing up as a Jewish American personally. So this is an artist, Zoe Sever, and you can see that she's kind of exploring with lots of patterns and bright colors. And so I was immediately attracted to her work. And also the street art movement in Tel Aviv is booming. And so this is a piece of street art by, his name is Diaz. And this is also something that you kind of wouldn't expect to see in Israel. So I was walking around, I hadn't made Aliyah yet. I was just sort of enjoying what I saw in museums and on the street and trying to learn kind of what was happening in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem artistically. This is an artist, Fatma Shannon Deary, that I was really interested in her work because she lives in a Druze village in northern Israel. So you can kind of see what she was doing is she kept bringing these, you know, she's moving and she keeps bringing these rugs around with her. So I started to learn more about the Israeli narrative through these works of art. So after that, after I sort of spent time in Israel, like it had been, I think, around close to a year, I still hadn't declared citizenship. I was sort of just living there and enjoying my life and teaching workshops here and there. I was offered a position with a startup called Eat With. So I'm not sure if anyone knows about that, but it's sort of like Airbnb for dining. And you can go to different Israeli chefs' homes and eat dinner in their homes and kind of learn about their cuisine. So, you know, Israelis have an amazing art scene. They also have an unbelievable startup scene. And so I kind of came to a point where I realized, okay, now I wanted to get a job. I was in Israel about a year. It had been way longer than 3 months. So I decided to accept this job with Eat With. However, Eat With demanded that I made Aliyah in order to be hired in their company because they didn't want to deal with the taxes of having a person who has a work visa. So at that moment, I was kind of came to a point where I actually had to make Aliyah. So I'm explaining this because not everybody goes through the typical Aliyah process that you sort of imagine. And so I was in Israel and actually physically made Aliyah through Israel. So I'm just going to show you, this is Eat With. It, you know, hard to resist working for a place like this where you get to try all different kinds of food and hang out with chefs. So this is another opportunity to hang out with more artisans and creative people. So I'm sort of showing you this picture because this is what we think of when we hear Aliyah. However, it's not always the case because there are many people like me who kind of go to Israel and then just keep staying. So my Aliyah, this is me by myself in 2015, was from Jerusalem. So the same day that I started my job with Eat With, I actually left early that day and went to Jerusalem and made Aliyah and followed that by going to the Israel Museum. And then I sort of thought, oh, I think I need a picture because of all those Aliyah pictures that everyone else has. So I took a picture of myself. These are the bags they gave us. And that was my first step. And I became a citizen of Israel. So I thought this would be interesting. Can everybody see this letter? Let me see if I can make it even bigger. Can you see that? Okay, so this is the letter that I needed to make Aliyah. So when you go to Israel, you need, if you're a Jewish person, you need a letter from your rabbi, we know Rabbi Westgard and Swartz, to say that you're Jewish, and then you present that to the committee and they sign a paper really fast and accept you as a Jewish citizen. So I thought that would be interesting just for everyone here. I mean, there are people who are really seeking citizenship in Israel. However, if you're a Jewish person, you can go and receive citizenship rather quickly. So I thought that would be fun to share. Whoops. Yeah. All right. So this is sort of a statistic I want to share with you. 58% of Olim, which are different individuals who made Aliyah, are either working on a potential business or interested in setting up a business. So I sort of had that within me. My grandma, as I mentioned, is a public artist. My family owned the paint bar. And so I was sort of searching as I was working at Eat With and trying to find something that I could do to contribute to Israeli society. So what I came up with was I kept leaving my house every day and walking by this wall that was graffitied. And I decided that it would be nice if I mosaiced the wall. So I sort of did that in an illegal manner. It started as kind of guerrilla art, but because I knew, I sort of had an understanding of the world of public art, and I had seen my grandma creating her ducks and sculptures and how much people appreciated the work. I knew that if I made a piece of art on the street and it covered the trash was behind there, that it would only make people happier. So I sort of continued. That first piece was illegal. I think being a new immigrant to Israel, I didn't really know the rules, but I also felt like if anyone asked me, I would pretend I really didn't know that it was illegal and thought, oh, in Israel, I thought you can, put mosaics up anywhere you want. So through this piece, I met my neighbors. I really got acquainted with my neighborhood in Tel Aviv. They all invited me over their house for high holidays, which was really nice. This is sort of where I get into different people that I met. These are little girls who were, my neighbors' children, and they were always coming by and helping with the mosaics. So when you sit on the street a lot, you meet different people around. And I ended up teaching them art. So it all sort of connects. You can see the one who's wearing the pattern dress. It looks like the mosaic, which is why I love this picture. So this is a picture of me in the Ben Gurion airport. And it's one of my favorite things to do. This is sort of maybe an Oleh thing too, that I'm from another place. But whenever I greet people at the airport, I like to bring a sign of a celebrity as sort of like something silly for someone else. So I bring a sign that says Ryan Seacrest, even if it would be my mom. And so then maybe Israelis would think, oh, Ryan Seacrest is coming or somebody's coming. So it's sort of a little joke I like to play with myself and whoever's arriving. So this is sort of, I'm sharing this because I love text and I love holding signs and sort of letting the sign speak for itself. So down the line, when I was thinking about my next piece, I found this wall, which was right near the beach in Tel Aviv, right near Gordon Beach. And I wanted to include text because I wanted the piece to sort of be standalone, that I wouldn't have to be there to kind of explain it. I just wanted the text to be positive and happy. So with a friend, we decided to put the words, "I love you so much," up on the wall to sort of evoke like a loving feeling. And this area was right across from a strip club. So I think like, I like contrast. So I wanted to put a phrase that really would brighten the area and make people feel good as they were walking through. So that's where I kind of came up with this statement, and I'll show you pictures from it afterwards. So it really resonated with people. I think again, having made Aliyah and just sort of being so new to the area and having it be like a blank canvas, I really was thinking about what kind of phrases or words would make people feel happy. And then you can see like people kept posing in front of it. You know, this woman was getting married and she took a picture in front of the wall. So she was doing exactly what I wanted, that she would have these words in back of her, and then she could share the picture with anyone that she cared or loved. So I just want to show you my process, that this is kind of how I work. This piece is very Mod Podge. This I Love You So Much. I kind of worked with stuff all from my house, anything I could find. I got a bit more serious in terms of learning how to cut and make mosaics. So I would find plates in Jaffa, or people would donate them on the street. People would leave them above the different mosaics that I did, and then I would pick them up and I started cutting them. So this is the before and after. And this is a guy named Jamal. And so I wanted to share him because he's been such a good friend, but also when people ask me how I find my materials, because being a foreigner and not speaking much Hebrew, it's always, you know, I have to negotiate everything and get the prices right and you know, I'm just all over the place finding materials. So having someone like Jamal, who's from Hebron, and having him being able to provide me with materials has been super helpful. So he and I have become good friends. You can see him there. In front of him, he has a cracked bowl, which he saves for me whenever anything breaks. He kind of saves it and puts it on the side and will give to me. So those are kind of relationships that I've built through my Aliyah, which have been really helpful in pursuing this kind of art. So this is the next piece that I did, which is in Tel Aviv. It says Yalla Balagan, which is a phrase meaning, in Arabic, Yalla means let's go. And a Balagan is sort of a slang for let's make a mess or let's have fun. So I saw these two walls here. This is not a synagogue. People think it's a synagogue, but it's actually an apartment building. And I saw this and I just thought, you know, wouldn't it be fun if we could make this Yalla Balagan? And so when people visit Tel Aviv, they can stand in the middle and have these two words around them. So I'm always thinking, what kind of work can people interact with? And in the picture on the right, I included a little ice cream cone because across the street was an ice cream shop. And so I always like to give an ode to the surrounding restaurants. So you can see my new friends that came from creating Yalla Balagan are Cici and Marco, and they're the founders of Arte Gelato. Maybe some of you have been there, but they made Aliyah from Tuscany and Sicily. So through this project of Mosaic and Yalla Balagan and an ice cream shop, I was able to befriend these Italian ice cream makers, which was pleasant for me because when I was making the piece, they would always bring me free ice cream. So that was great. And so these two, you know, were marine biologists and met on a cruise. Everyone has a story. So they met on a cruise ship. And then through that, they're scientists. And then they kind of went to learn the process of how to make gelato in Italy and came to Israel and found a need for better ice cream. And they've opened their shop. So not only do they make all of their ice cream in the back of the shop, but they also have music nights and, you know, local musicians come in and play live music. So they're very interesting and have become good friends too. So this was in 2018. There was a threat for deportation. I'm sure many of us remember this, of Eritrean and Sudanese refugees. So at that time, I was kind of, you know, I was making art. I was continuing to make public art. I was no longer doing illegal public art. And I got a call from a woman named Didi Maiman Khan, who's on the right, and Sister Aziza, who's on the left. So these two wonderful women run African Women's Refugee Collective, where they make lots of different things, baskets and pieces of art, and they sell them. And the women who work in the center make these baskets and are paid per hour, and that's how they're supported. So I'll just read this. This is a statement by Didi. I co-founded Kuchinate in 2011 when I started working with East African asylum seekers who had suffered through horrific experiences in the Sinai. I understood that a traditional Western approach to treating trauma would not suffice, and a different approach to rehabilitation was needed. So Didi called me and she said, how about we make a mosaic making a statement about deportation and what's going on in Israel, which at the time as a new Olah was really confusing to me, because I sort of thought, who am I to be doing this work? I don't know this community. I don't really have all the information, but she sort of said, let's do it. We're going to work together and make this mosaic. So that was scary, just because it was my first political piece. And but thankfully with their support, we were able to do it. So this is us kind of putting it together. This is Eden and Lena. And you can see that we don't have the letters of the text for the mosaic at the beginning, because we are, I was honestly worried that it would get torn down, or that people would have an issue with what we were doing. So we decided to kind of leave it as white squares, and everyone would walk by and say, Kol hakavod, or like, this is so beautiful. And later at night, I was going to come back with the words. It's not that it was going to be anything offensive. It's just that I just wanted us to work in peace until we were able to get the letters up. So the words we actually put on were, we were all once refugees. And we decided to do that statement because we didn't want to say anything no to deportation. We actually wanted to have a statement that was more sort of empathetic, and helped Israelis understand that everyone who came to the country of Israel was once a refugee. So that's why we decided to do this. And we got tons of people working on it, and we all got it up within, I think, 2 or 3 days. And actually my sister and her husband Drew were visiting, and so they were able to help install this piece with us. And there's Didi, you can see her, and Sister Aziza, who's an Eritrean nun who does a lot of human rights work in Israel. So another group of friends who I sort of now collaborate with every so often. So this is when I went from working in Tel Aviv to the Arava. So this is me working in the Arava Institute, which is very, very south. And this is, they were having a bike ride. It's called the Israel Ride. And they were raising money and wanted to have a donors wall. And so they asked me to come in and use different bike parts to create the wall. So you can see I'm sitting there and gluing down gears, and I'm getting ready for the wall. I had a lot of help from Jamal in terms of how to collect these pieces, and also just the Israeli public in general, because it was really confusing to me where I could find gears and how to talk. All the bike shops were like, why do you want these? They're trash. And I'm going to use them for the piece. So I started installing this piece, and it was on a kibbutz. And the Arava Institute is a center where it's for internationals, but Israelis and Palestinians, Jordanians, and also Europeans can work together on environmental solutions. So probably many of you have heard of it before. This is the piece. We kind of integrated wheels and all sorts of bike parts. It was about 30 feet long, and it was a great project. But really why I want to bring it up is because this is Amjad. And Amjad, throughout the whole process, I was working by myself and I would listen to music. And Amjad would always come by and say, put my name in the mosaic. And I was like, he's Jordanian. He was studying at the Arava Institute. He's a scientist. And he kept saying to me, put my name in the mosaic. And I was sort of like, Amjad, I can't put your name into the mosaic unless you want to help, or you help enough that I can put your name in the mosaic. So he just said, put my name in the mosaic. So I had been working on this piece. It was so long, it was 30 feet, and it took about, I think, close to a month. And at the very end, I was exhausted. I had done it all by myself. And Amjad, probably on the last night, came in and said, Mia, I'm going to help you. And so he kind of sat down. You can see he's like in his work shirt, and he just started mosaicing with me. So as a thank you, I put his name in the piece. You can see right here, it says Amjad. So that's always funny for me. And Amjad and I have stayed in touch, but it was really interesting. He's Palestinian, and it was very interesting hearing about his experience living in Jordan and then coming back to Israel to study. So this next piece that I did, I kind of got connected to Save a Child's Heart. It was sort of like I had heard about the organization. For anyone who doesn't know about Save a Child's Heart, It's an organization actually started by an Ole, and it's for children who are from developing countries who are in Israel to have different heart surgeries. So because it was started by an Ole, and there are lots of internationals who work with this organization, I connected with somebody about it. And I had just told them, I said, I think I would really love to do a mosaic for Save a Child's Heart, because I just would love to work with hearts and make something really colorful and big. So I started working on this piece, and at the bottom it says, saving the world one heart at a time. They're an amazing organization, and this is in their residential space. And so all of the kids are actually living upstairs, and then there's a playground, and that's where they play. So we all worked on this piece together. It was a real labor of love. And what's the people who stood out, you know, in this mosaic were Nesta and Andy, and they're from the Solomon Islands. So Nesta is Andy's mom, and it was the first time that Save a Child's Heart had served anybody from the Solomon Islands. And they worked so hard on the piece. So they just sat with me. And this is so interesting about mosaics, because it's not like I'm ever, you know, saying, I don't really build a team when I go into it. It's usually just me. And what ends up happening is there are always people, or they're, you know, just walking around or hanging out. And then there are always specific people who kind of come to the mosaic and help. It does have a very collaborative, like, feeling to it. I mean, everyone knows that they can pick up a piece and kind of just start installing. And so that's what Nesta, she was a mom, and I think she needed a distraction while her son was having his surgery. So she was just very, very active in building this with me. So, whoops, hang on. Okay, so you can see all of us. Everyone's wearing masks, but not because of COVID. It's because we're protecting ourselves from the dust, which is different. Most of my pictures, when we're all working together, we're always wearing masks, but it's because the dust is very intense. So you can see Andy and Nesta, and there's a little girl, Julia, in the corner, and all of us are working together on this. So for the next piece, I just wanted to share this. This is like, you never know in Israel. Israel is a very casual environment, and so you never know. You have to always respond to these Facebook messages, and people call you on the phone all the time expecting you to answer versus email. So it's a very non-email society. And so I received this tag on Facebook from this man. Ellie posted this, and my friend tagged me thinking, okay, nothing would happen, but I knew I had to follow up on it. And so what ended up happening was he was opening a restaurant. So I went from Save a Child's Heart into being in this restaurant, and he's Tunisian. And so he wanted a piece that was sort of Tunisian inspired. And so I did some research, and I looked at Tunisian doors, which you can see on the left. They always have these beautiful patterns. I didn't know anything about the Tunisian culture. And so I really wanted to kind of get it right. So when I was looking at their doors, I saw that there were lots of geometric shapes, and I also saw that they were using lots of bright colors. So when I did my design, you can see on the right, this is kind of how I do a design. Even though this doesn't really capture what it's going to look like, it's sort of, this is what I can give to a client for them to understand what I'm going to do for the mosaic. This is what I was fed. So Tunisian, you know, culture has wonderful food. So that's always a perk of the job, is being fed while working. But this is what we ended up with. So this is the mosaic. It's about 8 feet high in the Tunisian restaurant. And I tried to include lots of symbols. You know, there are khamsas everywhere, and they're really built into it. So that's the final piece. There weren't many helpers on this one, I think, because it was more commercial, and I was sort of there to do it on my own. But I did share Ellie and his family. So Ellie is an Ole from France who was starting his own restaurant, which I think is really admirable, and he's Tunisian. So that's a picture of him and his parents. They were very friendly and fed me along the way. And so I sort of learned about him being from France, and I also learned about his parents and his mom and her Tunisian background. So speaking of food, I'll get into this one. For anyone who's been to Jaffa, you've probably seen Abu Hassan or heard about it. It's one of the most popular hummus restaurants in the country. It's a Palestinian-run restaurant, and there are lots of different locations in Jaffa, and they have a humongous family. So I put a picture of the hummus for everybody to see, you know, what kind of food they're making. So I'd been talking to them, and I thought, you know, what would happen if we did a big wall that said hummus, like something really fun? Because, you know, I'm always trying to think, how can we get, you know, people who actually live in Israel excited, and outsiders who are visiting to get excited about text or an image of a wall. So this is the wall. It was right, this is the restaurant. This is their second restaurant. It was right next to it. And my first thought was I sort of had talked to the restaurant themselves, but I had not talked to the neighboring community. So I went ahead, I talked to the restaurant, and I thought, why don't we do this hummus baby? Everyone will have so much fun. It kind of has a 60s feeling. And, you know, they gave me the okay, and I started going. And I think what happened was that I got some pushback from one couple that lived in the apartment building. And they said, you know, don't assume we all like hummus. You know, they lived there, and they had been next to the restaurant and had a problem with the food and the way the restaurant was being run. And so it kind of turned into this chaotic installation where not everybody in the neighborhood wanted it. And so unfortunately, that only lived for a few days, and I turned it into this. So I turned it into a Jaffa garden. So things definitely happen along the way, and you know, designs can change and ideas can change. So it was more peaceful to make this a garden, but for the few people who saw it when I first put it up, they were really excited about it. And it definitely caught something with the restaurant being next to it, but it just shows that public art is challenging sometimes, especially in Israel, which is such a complicated place, to always get it right. So I had to be flexible, but that was pretty hard for me. But then what came out of it is this man, his name is Gil, and he's a tour guide, and I saw he was giving lots of tours and doing interesting things with the piece. So I reached out to him, and he and I kind of became friends, Gil Fanto. And so he has a museum of local nostalgia, which was very interesting to me. And you can see that he has all old Israeli products and, you know, different signage and so on. And he gives people tours of this museum. So that was a plus. I met him. His place is right next to the shop, and I would have never known about him had I not been doing that piece there. So I want to just quickly talk about David Gerstein. I don't know if anyone here knows his work. He's a very popular artist in Israel. And sort of after I was doing all of these mosaics, and I was kind of, after the hummus fiasco, I decided to take a little break and see what I could do in my studio. And I always passed his work, and his gallery is right next to my apartment. So I would pass his gallery, and then I saw that he was creating lots of collage. So these are the different collages that he's been getting into. And it was inspiring to me because, in a sense, this is sort of like Mosaic. And so I thought I would kind of play with what he's been playing with and see what I could do not being on the street. I needed a little break. So this was not even that long ago. So I started making my own still lives and collages, which have similar concepts to, I think, to mosaic art. Which is how I've kind of gotten into the paper mosaics, which is what I'm pursuing now. So this is some recent work. And then for anyone who knows, I'm actually back in Boston right now, and I'm teaching classes on how to do paper mosaics. So kind of pivoted because we're not doing as many communal mosaics because that would require a lot of touching and so on, but I'm able to kind of share my experience in Israel and teach people how to make paper mosaics, which is a whole different field for me, but I'm really enjoying it. So I just showed, you know, these are a few ones that have been made by students. They're really beautiful. And though we're not using ceramic and broken mirrors and all of those materials, we're repurposing materials that we have at home. So it's kind of capturing the same, when it breaks, put it together, but with paper. So that's what I've been sort of doing recently. And I want to kind of close with this, that this is my signature that I put on all of my pieces. And I do this, Mia Shown and Friends, because like you saw, I always have different friends and different people who are participating in the work and helping and collaborating. I can't name them all because that would be impossible on this little plaque, but I always hope that they know how grateful I am, you know, as a new immigrant to Israel, to meet them, and that they've enriched my life. So this is how I sign my work. I thought that would be fun to share. And it's just been being a foreigner, having all of these people work together and install these mosaics has been a really wonderful experience. So that's all from me. I wanted to finish with ahava, which means love. And because we just need more public art and more love in the world. And that's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions that everyone has. And thank you so much.
Amia?
Yes.
Hi, it's Adina Kling. How are you? It's so nice to see you.
Hi.
Your creativity is amazing. I'm sure your grandmother and your mother are just quelling now. So it's just really beautiful. I do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
It's interesting how you were saying how you were doing the hummus wall, and then the neighbor who kind of was not so pleased. I was wondering how you typically go about getting permission, if you do, or if you mainly just talk to the neighborhood. And the other is, you didn't really talk about if municipalities are paying you, or how you're supporting yourself. Yeah. So if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Okay, those are great questions. The first is that the permissions element, this is specific to Israel, that Israel is a very new country, right? So I would say the permissions are not really fully in place in terms of how it works, like with the logistics. I'm hoping to install a piece here in the next few months, and it's much more complicated in how, there are all these committees voting if they want it to go in or not, or what the location is. In Tel Aviv, the way I've seen it is there's one woman who okays it. And so if you're in with her, then you're in. So most of the pieces, any piece that I'm getting permission for, I try and call her. If I'm going to do a piece that's illegal, let's say, or a piece that I feel, maybe the illegal is the wrong word, maybe like a public piece that I really want out there. For example, the We Were All Once Refugee piece, that I think the slogan was extremely important. Then if I don't have time to consult that one woman, or if I know she may say no, then I get all of the stores in the area to get on board. And if the stores are on board, and everybody who lives around there are on board, then we can generally do it. That was on Rothschild Boulevard, and actually was knocked down, and we knew it was going to be knocked down. So that's how we were going to do that. In terms of the hummus wall, which I think was I kind of made a mistake with that one. I just asked the restaurant next door. I didn't, when I got there okay, I really thought it was going to be okay. And I didn't, really examine that further. So that was my bad. I should have gotten everybody, or put a letter, if I were to do it again, I would have put a letter in the apartment building saying this is going to happen. And if anyone has an issue, please call me. So, oh well. And in terms of supporting myself, I also teach a lot of workshops. So I teach workshops. I have a studio in my apartment in Tel Aviv, so I'm teaching a lot. And then the big pieces that I'm doing, I'm getting paid for, like an artist, as work. And so I sort of always am balancing that. So when I have a piece, I'm not doing as many workshops, but if I don't have a piece, then I'm going to try and teach more and more workshops to kind of supplement my income. So that's how I make it work. But there were, when I was getting started, and also I applied for grants sometimes, but when I was getting started, I kept getting rejected from grants. And so that's why I did that I Love You So Much piece, because I needed to show grant committees the effect that I knew public art could have, but I needed to get people to take pictures in front of it and enjoy it so that I could submit it for future grants and projects.
Okay, so we have a number of questions from the chat. The first one is, where do you teach the paper mosaic art?
Mostly I've been teaching those sort of with different Jewish communities in Boston, so mostly private classes. I'm hoping to do more open ones, but they're all online and through Zoom. I've taught a few for Temple Emmanuel. And also through the paint bar, I'm collaborating again with my mom and sister. And so people have, if they want to do an art project with their group, then they can call the paint bar and then I'll teach that. But if you want to take, if you want one, then you can let me know. I'm happy to run any more classes.
And Susan wanted to know, how do you glue the glass onto the cement wall?
So I don't have my tools with me, but there's a really strong glue. It's called devik, in Hebrew is glue, and keramika, which is ceramic. And it looks actually just like hummus. And I mix that and then I use that to put the pieces up. So I always put the pieces on first. And it's sort of like the way you would lay tile in your bathroom. You'll put the pieces down and then grout it over it with the tile. So very, very, very strong glue.
And Marla wanted to know if you had any mosaic murals in Haifa.
No, I don't. I know it's Boston's sister city. I've been in touch with the Haifa through CJP, the Haifa group, but we haven't. I did see a site in Haifa and I took measurements. So hopefully that will come through. But I think there was a, you know, it's just the building itself. There are a lot of community centers that CJP has collaborated with the Haifa community. And so it just was, they're rebuilding a center and it was taking a bit longer. So I hope that's in our future. I don't know. I'll do it.
And Barbara Gaffin had asked, she wanted to know if you were collaborating with any Palestinian women on any art projects.
I haven't collaborated with any Palestinian women yet on art projects. I participated in Our Generation Speaks, which is a fellowship program at Brandeis, and connected with Mass Challenge, which is an Israeli-Palestinian entrepreneurial program where you work together to build businesses. So I did partner with a Palestinian woman on a business which was called the Palestinian Speakers Collective, trying to bring more Palestinian speakers to Jewish groups. But hopefully, so we did that for a little while. In terms of a mosaic, I would love to. I met once with the Bustan Gan, which is in Jaffa. I met them while I was doing the piece next to the hummus restaurant because they're an Israeli-Palestinian kindergarten. So I hope one day that will work. But the answer is not yet.
Okay. And I was curious, so how fluent are you in Hebrew? I mean, has your Hebrew, do you consider yourself, were you fluent when you became, made Aliyah, or are you fluent now? How does that work?
Yeah, I wasn't fluent when I made Aliyah. I think I went to Salman Schechter, so I had a good foundation of Hebrew. But I think, I didn't mention this, but when I was in Tel Aviv, I also worked in an art gallery and I was selling art to Israelis. So I think that really solidified my Hebrew when I had to negotiate prices for paintings. And so I don't think I'm fully fluent at this point, but I'm pretty close. So I have to, with all of the different shops and vendors that I work with, I usually have to speak in Hebrew. So to make sure to communicate correctly and understand, I have to make sure that I can speak Hebrew. But I went to Ulpan for a few months when I got there.
Cool. So David Greenfield wanted to know, how do your volunteer coworkers get instructions on where to glue the pieces? Do you have like a master pattern that you use or that they follow?
They're usually for every piece that I do, if it's with a client, then I'll have, like I showed you with the restaurant mosaic, there's sort of a plan. When I have helpers, that can sometimes be a challenge because everyone is so eager to help, which is so nice. But I also need to make sure that the mosaic looks how I say it's going to look and that we get a good product. So I usually will have the helpers, I'll kind of put them in an area and tell them exactly what to do, and I'll show them our design. But with a lot of my pieces, it's not like I would ever make a yellow sun, for example. I'd make a circle with all different colored pieces, and then I'd grout it yellow. So the in-between of all the pieces is yellow rather than the pieces themselves. I don't know if that really makes sense. But so it's pretty freeform, which is why I can get a lot of helpers, and they can be very helpful.
I was really impressed with the mural that was at the Aravak place on the, in the Negev, that mosaic, because it had the bike parts, and I've never seen anything like that. That is so impressive. Do you have any other mosaics that use something other than your typical mosaic pieces?
I always throw in weird pieces because anything that has a glaze on it, like if you can use plastic in a mosaic. So sometimes I've put Legos in mosaics before. I like to put hidden things, especially if there are kids around, so that they can kind of play I Spy and look for things. So I'm always using different materials. The bike was the most extreme because I had that huge wheel and I had to get the kibbutz guy who was in charge of the construction to come in and install that for me. But I actually partner now with a laser cutter, and so I can get a lot of shapes cut by a laser cutter, which cuts plastic. So that's been pretty cool. So instead of tile now, I can have pieces of plastic, and I use the computer to do it, so I can get all kinds of crazy shapes.
So how much time do you find you're spending in Israel versus here? I mean, forgetting about this COVID thing, I realize this is an exception to the rule.
I think I'm generally in Israel for, it's probably a little more than half, maybe 60-40, because when I come back, I'll usually stay like a month here or there. And sometimes I'll teach a workshop while I'm here, work on a project. So I kind of go back and forth.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know if anyone else has any questions. So my phone's going off. If there's, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else has any other questions, but we pretty much have gone through everything here. And this has been, I've found this absolutely fascinating, and it's really great to see your latest artwork. And I don't know, I really like that bicycle one. That's just fantastic. But all your work's magnificent.
Fabulous. Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for spending the time with us. And
thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and for everyone for coming.
And
is this recorded?
Yes.
Oh, and how do we access it?
It'll be on the website.
Oh, wonderful. I want to share it with my daughter. Good. And I knew your grandfather, so yeah.
And I mean, I'm in Boston right now, but if anybody is, when I'll be back in Tel Aviv, it's really fun when there are people from Temple Emmanuel, or for anyone that is coming to Tel Aviv one day, let me know.
Well, we have a picture in front of you, Yalla Balagan.
Yeah, good. That's great.
I spotted it right away.
Good.
Patting myself on the back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.